السنة مثل سفينة نوح، من ركبها نجا ومن تركها غرق.
الحمد لله الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله وكفى بالله شهيدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. As to what proceeds, after praising Allah the Most High, separated from His creation in a manner which befits His Majesty, with love and veneration exclusively for Him, and then requesting He, the Most High, to send His Salah and Salam upon our final Prophet and Messenger, Khatimul Anbiya wal Mursaleen, Muhammad ibn Abdullah al-Qurashi alayhi salatu wassalam. We meet once again for our weekly meeting to study the Tarjumah, the biography or the legacy of Amir al-Mu'mineen fi al-Ḥadīth, Imam al-Dunya, Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala. So the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, al-Allāmah, ʿUbaydullah, Raḥmānī, Mubārakpūrī, rahimahullah ta'ala, when he wrote this forward, he mentioned, this is what the Shaykh rahimahullah mentioned, that after 23 years after his father, Shaykh al-Salām Mubārakpūrī, passing away, the second edition is now being published. So there was a waiting period of 23 years before the book was republished again. And there was 36 years since the first edition was published. So when the Shaykh wrote this, 36 years had passed for the first edition, and the second edition was published 23 years after his father, Shaykh al-Salām Mubārakpūrī, passed away. Ṣaḥīḥ هذا or نعم. The first, the Shaykh mentioned that the people of knowledge, the ulama, they met this book with great acceptance and gave it its full estimation, meaning the people of knowledge, they gave it its due right, meaning that when they assessed the book, they spoke very highly of the book. And the copies of the first edition, they had run out in a short amount of time after it was published. This is a very good sign for a good book, or that when it is published, that the copies are sold, or they finish in a very short period, small period of time. According to Shaykh Ubaydullah, Raḥmānī Mubārakpūrī rahimahullah, he said that this, he believed, was a sign of acceptance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of the sincere intention that his father manifested, the author, that he had in his heart, which he manifested in what he wrote. So actions, our intentions are in our hearts, and our actions, they represent or they interpret what is in the hearts. So the Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala had a great love. Shaykh al-Salām Mubārakpūrī, the author of the book, had immense love and a great attachment to Ṣaḥīḥ al-Bukhārī. In fact, we don't know of any Salafi Ahlul Hadith scholar that I have come across, except that we see that the love for Bukhari and his Sahih is always great. And the Shaykh, he mentioned the hadith, the famous hadith, as we know, which is the first hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, which is إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ لِلنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. actions are but according to their intentions, and every person will receive what they intend. So, Ṣaḥīḥ al-Bukhārī, as we know, is the most authentic book after the Qur'an, according to the ijma' of the Muslim Ummah. And there is no dispute on this. So if anybody was to love a book after the Qur'an and venerate a book after the Qur'an, then they should venerate and love and attach themselves to that book, which is famously known as Ṣaḥīḥ al-Bukhārī. This is the first part. So Ṣaḥīḥ al-Bukhārī is the most quoted after the Qur'an, according to the ijma' of the Muslim Ummah. And there is no dispute on this. There is no khilaf on this. Anybody who disputes this position on this fact is a mubtadi', is a heretic, as mentioned by Shah Waliullah Muhaddith Dehlavi Rahimahullah Ta'ala, who does not accept the ijma' of the Muslim Ummah since the time when Imam Bukhari Rahimahullah compiled his Sahih till this day. In the edition that has been published by Jami' Salafiyya Banaras, I think it says 26 years. Correction should be made that it is 36 years. So if you ever came across the English printed edition of Jami' Salafiyya Banaras, there is a mistake. They said that it was reprinted after 26 years, but it is 36 years. This was the second point. Now, the first edition of the book, which is the third point, in the Urdu language, was published in 1329, 1911, during the life of Shaykh al-Salām al-Salām Raḥmānī Mubārakpūrī rahimahullah ta'ala. So he died 13 years after the publication of its first edition. And then the second edition was published 23 years after his death. This is the fourth point. The fifth point is that the acceptance of a book and its criteria is the praise of the scholars and not the normal people. So if you were able to judge whether this is a good book or a bad book, or whether the book has been accepted or rejected by, whether it has been accepted or rejected within the Muslim Ummah, then the criteria is always the people of knowledge, Ahlul Ilm. It doesn't matter what me and you think. The people of knowledge are the ones who will assess. The people of knowledge are the ones who have the criteria of knowing whether this book is beneficial, or whether the content of this book is correct, and whether this book is worthy of being praised. The next point also, which is, you can say the sixth point, is that the book was authored for the scholars as well as the lay. This is a miza of this book. You find that the books of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah ta'ala, are for the laymen as well as the scholars. So the scholars benefit from them as well as the laymen. The scholars benefited from them as well as the laymen benefiting. Also the book of Shaykh Abdul Salam Mubārakpūrī rahimahullah ta'ala, this book that which we are going to study is a book which was authored or written for the scholars as well as the laymen, meaning both can benefit. The layman may at times need to go back to the people of knowledge to ask for further clarification of points that he may not understand. But in general, the book has been written, or you can say that the set out of the book is such that the layman can read and benefit. Yeah. Seventh point is that the first edition of the book being sold out is an apparent sign of the sincerity of the author. هذا نحسبه هكذا والله سبحانه وتعالى أعلم بالصواب. This is how we see it, because the book, no doubt, has definitely done its wonders and has defended Imam al-Bukhari as well as his Sahih. So we find that the Shaykh rahimahullah, he mentioned that what one would have wanted or would have wished for was that the second edition of the book be published during the life during the lifetime of his father, Shaykh Abdul Salam Barb. Regretfully, there were some obstacles. From amongst the obstacles that we know were that the funds, there were no funds. So there was some, you could say, due to lack of funds, the book could not be published or was not published during the life of the Shaykh himself. And even after the Shaykh passed away, in the 23 years, after 23 years when the book was published, even then that problem remained until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy for the book to be published once again. So the Shaykh, he mentioned an institute that the Shaykh mentioned is Darul Hadith Raḥmānī. This institute was established in 1921. Darul Hadith Raḥmāniyyah was an institute or a madrasa that was established in Delhi, in old Delhi from what I understand, in the year 1921. This institute operated for, you could say, over 20-something years. It was shut down by the British in 1947. So just over 20 years, this madrasa ran for 20 years. This madrasa was established by two successful Punjabi Salafi business. So they were, as we know, that Delhi had a lot of business, and there were a lot of Salafi businessmen in Delhi who had a lot of money, and they utilized their wealth by helping and assisting financially to spread the Salafi da'wah, to congregate the Salafi, to propagate the Salafi da'wah. So there were two brothers. The elder one was Sheikh Abdul Rahman, and his younger brother was Sheikh al-Rahmān. These were two brothers who established this madrasa known as Darul Hadith Raḥmāniyyah. But this madrasa had a very high criteria, meaning the entry exam was a very difficult exam. You would not have to be an A-star student, but even from amongst the A-star students, you would have to be the best amongst them to get it. They say that the entrance exam was taken by the great scholars from the whole of India. I would come there and they would take your exam, and then they would agree, all of them, like if there was a panel of 3 scholars, all 3 would have to agree that you were worthy of studying at Darul Hadith Raḥmānī. And they would ask you questions in every single field of al-Islam. So think of every field: tafsir, usul al-fiqh, usul al-tafsir, nahwa, sarf, Arabic language, all the different aspects of the Arabic language. They would ask you questions in every single. If only you were able to answer those questions, then you will be selected. The other institutes, or you can say the other madaris around India, would only send their best students to go there for the entry exam. So not anybody would turn up and say, you know what, I want to come and I want to study and I've graduated. So there was a link between the scholars, and they would say, send us your best students. So the madrasas would send their best students, and then those students would come there and they would further their studies. And that's how this madrasa, Darul Hadith Raḥmāniyyah, was established by these two businessmen, Salafi businessmen who are Punjabi. And another, you can say, feature that this madrasa had was that the two businessmen provided everything for the students. So in those days, in the morning, they would do exercise and they would be given milk with almonds, everything was provided for. So meaning that you would have the best students who were given. So these two businessmen, they invested their money and they said to the students, we will provide you with everything that you need to study hard. Study hard, learn your deen, and then after learning your deen, you will graduate and you go back and spread the mother of the people of Hadith. Now, so Shaykh al-Salām Mubārakpūrī, rahimahullah, was a lecturer there. And he died teaching at the institute in Rajab on 1342, corresponding to 1924. Shaykh, he died in teaching at the institute or the madrasa known as Dar al-Ḥadīth al-Raḥmānī. There is a book that has been written on Dar al-Ḥadīth al-Raḥmāniyyah by one of the sheikhs, whose name is Sheikh Asad Alami. It's a book worth buying and not students, but see if you can spot like me. Is that what you say? Yeah? Huh? Sorry. So this is the book which talks about the history of Dar al-Ḥadīth al-Raḥmāniyyah, Delhi. One important figure which everybody may be interested in, of knowing who studied in Dar al-Ḥadīth al-Raḥmāniyyah, then he was a sheikh who is known as Sheikh Abdullah Tar'awi, who was the teacher of al-Hafidh al-Haqiq. He studied in Dar al-Ḥadīth al-Raḥmāniyyah and graduated from Dar al-Ḥadīth al-Raḥmāniyyah. Sheikh of Hafidh al-Haqiq. Traveled all the way from Jizab, I believe that's where he was from Saudi Arabia, and he came and studied and he graduated. In fact, they appointed him as the Imam of the masjid because they said he had a beautiful voice. And he was nicknamed as Arab Sahib, was his nickname. They used to call him Arab Sahib. This is the Sheikh of Hafidh al-Haqiq. Everybody knows how much knowledge Hafidh al-Haqiq. And Hafidh al-Haqiq studied with who? Shaykh Abdullah. Shaykh Abdullah studied in Dar al-Ḥadīth al-Raḥmāniyyah. So this is a very important. I've visited the institute. There's still some classes that are remaining there. Although the madrasa now is in the hands of the government, but they've converted it into a government school, sadly. But one can, when one walks, if one was to walk those roads or those those streets or those classrooms or those corridors, one could imagine that some great giants must have walked past these corridors. Some great giants must have sat in this classroom and must have taught the hadith, because every single graduate that graduated from Dar al-Ḥadīth al-Raḥmāniyyah, they said that he was, what's the word they have about? Polymath, is that what they call him? Mutafanni. Yes? Was mutafanni in all the different sciences about this. Nah. So when Shaykh al-Salām Mubārakpūrī rahimahullah passed away, the sons of the Shaykh rahimahullah, they had the intention to release or republish this book. Now, but they were not able to publish that book whilst they were young, and this was with the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything has an appointed time, as the Shaykh said, as the Shaykh mentioned. But ever since they were young and they knew the importance of this book, they always wanted to republish the works of their father. And this is known about many scholars we find today. We find many scholars today that many of them, they write a lot of books. There's a lot of manuscripts, and they have passed away. The knowledge has been preserved in the form of a manuscript. That manuscript now requires to be published. So either you have the children Sheikh's children or the Sheikh's sons or Sheikh's daughters, whoever they are, they have that eager and enthusiasm to publish that. If the sons or the children of the Shaykh are not in that field and do not know the importance, then we pray to Allah that they are good students that the Shaykh had, who will have taken works of the Shaykh and published them so that the work does not go to waste and refines. And I can remember now that there's a Shaykh that's passed away, and another student of the Shaykh contacted me, and he said to me that we need to publish the works of that Shaykh. The sons, they don't know nothing of how to do what they do, because none of them met in that field, but they requested that Shaykh, who is a student of the Shaykh, may this work be published. So this obstacle is always there. So whenever somebody teaches his students, he always makes this dua. I always make this dua. But if I was to complete and write something and it was unpublished and if I was to die, and inshallah, my son of my students would carry on and publish all those works. All the works that I'm working on, after I die, they will not stop. They will not be on standby, but the work would be published, inshallah. Now, so the Shaykh Rahimahullah mentioned about one of his brothers, ʿUbayd al-Raḥmān, of how noble and great his brother was. He had a good nature, and he really wanted to publish this book. But he was not able to live or fulfill that wish of his, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had decreed something else for him due to him becoming ill. So he passed away, rahimahullah ta'ala, and after passing away, the task of publishing the book rested on the shoulders of the other brothers. And the Shaykh, he made dua that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive him and his brother. We say that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive the Shaykh's father, the Shaykh and his brothers, and all those who helped and facilitated for this book to be published for a second time, and especially also those who helped and assisted that this book be translated, especially the translators. Now, so this is what the Shaykh, rahimahullah, he mentioned. He mentioned that the second edition was published after World War II. And during the World War II, as we all know, that when wars happen and occur, the prices of everything go up. So even when they wanted to publish that, another obstacle came, which was the war, Second World War. And the Shaykh mentioned with regards to the Tawārīth are all those who call to making ibadah for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wanting to rule or with the ideologies amongst the people. As we know that the people who call for democracy, there's people who call for communism, all these different objectives that the people have. The Shaykh said that after the war finished, then they were able to gather the funds, and they were able to overcome their obstacles, and the book then was published. Now, so this, if you were to ask me the question that why are we reading or studying this book, Sincerity Imam al-Bukhari, or the Legacy of Imam al-Bukhari, then Shaykh Ubaydullah Mubārakpūrī, Raḥmānī Mubārakpūrī rahimahullah, has given us the following. Every single person knows Fath al-Bārī is one of the most famous and accepted explanation of Sahīḥ al-Bukhari, written by al-Ḥāfidh ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala. And Fath al-Bārī has an introduction. So Fath al-Bārī is a commentary or an explanation of Sahīḥ al-Bukhari. And Fath al-Bārī has an introduction known as Huda as-Sāl, Hadi Sari, as the famous. Not the correct is to say Huda as-Sāl. So they say the people of knowledge have all agreed that it would not be an overstatement, or it would not be a statement of exaggeration if it was said that it is almost impossible for one to fully comprehend Ṣaḥīḥ al-Bukhārī without reading it. So if you wanted to master Ṣaḥīḥ al-Bukhārī, he would have to read Fathul Bari. And with Fathul Bari, you would have to read Huda as-Sab. Huda as-Sari is like, they say that Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, he read over 100 commentaries of Ṣaḥīḥ al-Bukhārī, and then he summarized everything that he read over those 100 commentaries to produce his masterpiece work known as Fathul Bari. And it is known that every single book, the heart, like we say, the qalb of every single book is the muqaddim. So I only know of one scholar who understood Ṣaḥīḥ al-Bukhārī without reading Fathul Bari, and that is the great Indian scholar of Gujarat known as Abdul Jalil as-Samrudi. He is the only one who understood Bukhari, and he was an expert on Bukhari without reading Fathul Bari. Apart from that, we know that everybody is in need of Fathul Bari. So the Shaykh said that you can't understand. People say that there is no hijrah ba'd al-fath, la hijrah ba'd al-fath, meaning you don't need to go to any other book to understand Ṣaḥīḥ al-Bukhārī. If you only have Fathul Bari, it is as though that you have these 100 explanations. So this is, you could say, a right state. It would be absolutely correct to say that you cannot understand Ṣaḥīḥ al-Bukhārī without Fathul Bari. In the very same way, the Shaykh said that, making the parallel, that in order to familiarize oneself with Ṣaḥīḥ al-Bukhārī, then one should read the book of Shaykh al-Salām Mubārakpūrī rahimahullah. So he said, similarly, if you were to say that it is necessary for those who study Ṣaḥīḥ al-Bukhārī to familiarize themselves with the book Sirat al-Bukhari, then it would be correct for us to say so. This is a unique book in its subject in the Urdu language due to its detail and completeness. So Sirat Imam al-Bukhari has certain things which will not be found in other books. The book was in Urdu language, and alhamdulillah it's been translated into the English language. So before, the book was only restricted to who? The Urdu speaking tabaq of people, and now it's also available in the English language. So this is the miza, or the distinctive feature of the legacy of Imam al-Bukhari, or the seerah of Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala, that one should read this book or study this book. The distinctive feature of of Sirat Imam al-Bukhari is that you will find things in this book which you will not find anywhere else. And some due to its completeness and detail. And the Shaykh will now explain what this book has, what makes it special. So this is the first thing. If somebody was to ask you, why are you studying Sirat Imam al-Bukhari? I say Sirat Imam al-Bukhari is just like Fathul Bari. Just like you can't do without Fathul Bari, and in Fathul Bari, Huda as-Sari, its introduction. In the very same way, this Sirat Imam al-Bukhari is a book which has issues in detail and completeness which you will not find, may not find in other books, and Allah knows best. Now, second reason of why this book is important to study, where you might not find such things that are discussed in this book in other books, is that first of all, it should be known that the people all believe, meaning the blind followers, they all believe that Imam Bukhari was a mujtahid matu, an unrestricted mujtahid, according to their definitions of how they define a matu. So that means that they all agree that Bukhari was neither Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i or Hanbal. Bukhari he had his own madhab. This is what they say. They said that the criteria that they have set in order for somebody to be a mujtahid, Bukhari was well above that benchmark. So they believe this. Like they all say that our Imams, as they call them, the Hanafis say that our Imam Abu Hanifa was a mujtahid. Malikis say that our Imam Malik was a mujtahid. The Shafi'iyya say that our Imam Imam Shafi was a mujtahid. The Hanabila say that our Imam Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was a mujtahid. They all agree that Imam Bukhari was a mujtahid mutlaq. And although Ṣaḥīḥ al-Bukhārī, which is it's famously known, the book of Imam al-Bukhari, famously known as Ṣaḥīḥ al-Bukhārī, is known as a book of reference. But in reality, it's not a book only for reference. Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah, like I always mention to the students, in his book, he manifested his mastery in ijtihad, meaning deriving fiqh rules. So Bukhari came with this method of deriving, making ijtihad and deriving fiqh issues directly from the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He set the path that the way we derive our fiqh is directly from the hadith of Rasulullah. So he compiled these two terminologies which became separate, which one in reality one, which was fiqh and sunnah. So Bukhari, he set the benchmark of something which we call fiqh al-Ḥadīth or fiqh al-Sunnah. And this can be seen in the chapter headings for the tarajim, the titles of the abwab, the chapterings of his book al-Jami' al-Sahih. Now, the Shaykh mentioned that Imam al-Muhaddithin, Imam al-Bukhari, was a mujtahid mutba'. And like I mentioned, that the madhabists, they have this criteria that you have to be a mujtahid in order to independently exercise your positions. So, based upon their criteria or their benchmark, they said that Imam al-Bukhari was a mujtahid mutlaq. And the Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala, Shaykh al-Salām Mubārakpūrī rahimahullah ta'ala, he makes this very apparent and very clear that although others have complimented Imam al-Bukhari of being a qualified mujtahid, but the book also highlights his mastery in ijtihad. That Imam al-Bukhari was not only a great muhaddith, but he was a great faqih as well, meaning that both he was a master of hadith as well as a master of fiqh. So we can't say that he was greater in one area than the other. They were both equal to according to Ahl al-Hadith. Bukhari was a leading faqih as well as a leading muhaddith. Although these two terminologies separating the muhaddith from the faqih, they came many centuries later, they came after n years. But this is clear, and this can be easily noticed in the tarajim, titles and the abwab of Ṣaḥīḥ al-Bukhārī. But the Shaykh mentioned that this is part of al-Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala's intelligence, how much knowledge Allah has blessed him. Anybody could write about this. But what makes this book also so important for a student of knowledge who wants to take the path of the people of Hadith was that a comparison be made between the fiqh of Ahl al-Hadith and the methodology of ijtihad adopted by the fuqaha of Ahl al-Hadith with the fiqh of Ahl al-Ra'i. Now Ahl al-Ra'i, is a term that is used generally by certain scholars to mean all four madhabs, famous fiqh madhabs. So it includes the Hanafiyyah or the Ahnaf. Ahnaf is better to call them Ahnaf, Shafi'iyyah, the Malikiyyah and the Hanabilah, to make a comparison of how their scholars stipulate or derive or deduce rulings based upon the ijtihad, and how the jurists or the fuqaha of the Ahlul Hadith do. So what we can see, and the Shaykh mentioned Ahlul Rai, and then he said and methodology of ijtihad of the fuqaha of Iraq. So that shows he mentioned something in its generality, who are Ahlul Rai. And I said Ahlul Rai are all four madhabs. And then he mentioned the ijtihad of the fuqaha of Iraq. Who is he referring to here? The fuqaha of Iraq are being, who he means by the fuqaha of Iraq are the Ahnaf, Hanafats. Yes, famously known as the people of Kuf. Famously known as the people of Kuf. And for the difference between them to be made clear. So a comparison was made. Imam Bukhari being one of the leaders and one of the champions of fiqh Ahlul Hadith, and then also making a comparison with Ahlul Rai, especially the Hanafites. So what are the differences between them to be made clear in order for those seeking the truth to recognize the fiqh of Ahlul Hadith and why it is praised. So we have a movement now, sadly to say, in 2024, where certain people are making a propaganda by saying that there is no such thing as fiqh Ahlul Hadith, or there is no such thing as a madhab known as Ahlul Hadith, or this is not a separate madhab, they don't have no usulul fiqh, they don't have no books of fiqh. So all this that is now out there on your social media, and you're finding those who claim to be following the Salaf. It's crazy that they say that this is the way of the Salaf, whereas we know that the Salaf, how long did the Salaf live? If you look at 3 generations, or first 3 generations, the golden era, it surely finished before 400 years, for sure, without any dispute. And the fanaticism and following a particular, blindly following a particular madhab started after 400 years, as mentioned by Ibn al-Qayyim and Shaykh Waliullah and others. So this book rebuttals and clarifies this doubt or this propaganda or this slander or this allegation. And the author, Shaykh al-Salām, spoke about this matter in great length and clarified this argument in the second part of his book. That's what makes the seerah of Imam al-Bukhari so important for your Ostral knowledge. So, and as the Shaykh, his son, he mentioned, Shaykh Ūbayd, that there is a study which is unparalleled by anything before it. So this was the second point, the comparison, the dots. The first thing we said, what was the first important thing that I mentioned with regards to this book, Seerah of Imam al-Bukhari, is that its status is like Fathul Bari, that it's something which the source of knowledge cannot do without it in order to understand Sahih al-Bukhari. The second point is related to Imam al-Bukhari himself, of how he exercised his ijtihad, and also rebuttaling the doubts and the allegations and the slanders that there is no such thing as a madhab called Ahlul Hadith, and Ahlul Hadith don't have no fiqh, they don't have no usul, and at the same time making a comparison while defending the mother of the people of Hadith. Also, the third most important part of the third important feature of this book is that the author, or Shaykh al-Salām Mubārakpūrī, spoke in great length, we can say, on Imam al-Bukhāri's Tarājim. Imam al-Bukhāri's Tarājim, which are the titles of his books. He spoke about the Tarājim. Tarājim are the headings that you can find on each different chapters, and the adapt ijtihad of Imam al-Bukhāri. Al-Salām Mubārakpūrī talked about this in great detail, and you won't find what he spoke about this in any of the books. Because why? Wasn't there anybody else that wrote about the Tarājim of Imam al-Bukhāri before him, that we are claiming that Al-Salām Mubārakpūrī's book is so important? Now, definitely scholars wrote. But al-Salām Mubārakpūrī benefited everything that was written before it, and he added to that which was not mentioned in all other books. So that makes this book, of which we are going to read, very important. That the most difficult, you can say, task, or the most difficult aspect of understanding Sahīḥ al-Bukhāri is the headings, the chapter headings, the Tarājim and the Abwāb, which Al-Salām Mubārakpūrī has talked about. So the second part of the book shows the ocean of knowledge that Al-Salām Mubārakpūrī rahimahullah ta'ala had. He shows how much knowledge that Allah had given him. So this is something which is very important. So like I mentioned, the adapt ijtihad of Imam al-Bukhāri's fiqh is elucidated in his chapter headings. And to be fair and just to Shaykh al-Salām Mubārakpūrī, conducted a study of this issue which cannot be found anywhere else. That what makes this book so special and so important. And it shows the lengths that he went to and the research that he did. Now, so here, his son Ubaydullah Raḥmānī Mubārakpūrī, he said that the Shaykh, his father, al-Salām Mubārakpūrī, he really exhausted himself in his research and in what he wrote. The Shaykh, as we shall see inshallah in the weeks to come, he disparaged and he refuted certain concepts and certain positions of certain people. His son said that my father did not intend to attack anybody. This shows the benefit that we can take from the statement of Ubaydullah Mubārakpūrī is you can refute somebody without attacking. That the objective of refutations are rad, which should be araddul ilm. First of all, it should be academic and knowledge based. Then the refutations should not intend to attack or character assassinate the person, but rather it should be to correct that which is wrong and to clarify the truth. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the time that we live in, we see that many of the refutations that are done, not all, I don't say all, I say many, you can see that they are done on the purpose of attacking the individual and not rectifying the position or reforming that person who is spoken of. This is why it is very important for us to adopt the characteristic of the people of knowledge the ulama, that for those who speak about other people first should be those who are qualified. This is the most fundamental issue. And most of the people who are speaking in the West have not even studied, let alone being qualified. Keyboard warriors, hyped up. If you were to listen to their Fatiha, or if you were to ask them simple questions, they will not be able to answer. Yet they are busy writing and refuting people of knowledge, eating the flesh of the scholars, thinking that they are doing good. وَيَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ يُحْسِنُونَ صُنْعًا. So this is the reality. Look at the scholars, look at this disclaimer that has been put right at the end. We ask Allah to make us like Shaykh al-Salām Mubārakpūrī and Shaykh ʿUbayd al-Mubarakpūrī, that if we are to speak about people, we speak with justice. And if somebody is refuted, that he is not refuted with the intention of attacking, but to clarify the truth and to rectify his mistake. So if you do, the Shaykh said that if you do see that somebody has been spoken against, then that person by default must have spoken about Imam al-Bukhari, defamed Imam al-Bukhari, degraded Imam al-Bukhari. So in defense of Imam al-Bukhari as a necessity, Shaykh al-Salām defended, because the haqq is with al-Bukhari, or was with al-Bukhari. And the Shaykh, he said something which is very important, and that is that the Shaykh will not hear any critique or criticism on the criticism of his father unless you have read the entire book from its beginning to its end. It's put down as a condition. But don't bring me any criticism on my father until you've read everything that my father has written. Only then I will lend my ears to you. Now, so this was on the 3rd of December 1946, 1 year before the partition, or 1 year before the madrasa was closed down by the British. So in 1946 is where the Shaykh wrote this second preface. So by this we come to the end of the second preface. So we know now today some of the important issues that were mentioned in this preface, what makes this particular book stand out, why we're studying this book, and the efforts that were made with regards to this book. Now, Jazakumullah Khairan for attending, and I hope that it's been beneficial for you and you understand the importance of this book. And wallahi, before I finish, I say that the time that we're living in, the attacks and the slandering that I'm seeing on social media and the propaganda that is being done by the fanatics of blind following, there was never a greater need to study this book than we are right now studying this book in 2024 in the month of April. Yes, in the month of April in 2024. Wallahi, I believe that the timing is just perfect. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He allows us to benefit from this book and we act upon that which we study and we know. Now, Jazakumullah khairan wa baraka feekum. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.